Well, welcome back to Let's Talk About the Bible. Here with my buddy Scott. How's it going?
What's up?
There you go. Pastor Jamie at Spokane Baptist, do the youth pastoring here at the church, and got given another question by one of our teenagers today. Super excited to go through it. How's it going, man?
Doing well.
Doing well.
Doing well. It's starting to get hot. I don't like the heat.
It is. You guys can't see because the blinds, but the sun is out, and it's a good day today for that. But today, question, we got one question. We've been doing a couple of multiple questions. Today we got one. We're going back to that one question. So do you want to share the question that we got today?
Yeah, so it's a good one. And honestly, this is good. This applies to all of us here. The question says, "Hi, Pastor. How did Jesus take care of himself, mentally and or spiritually?" So how did Jesus take care of himself, right?
Yeah.
You got your spiritual needs. Jesus was obviously hounded at all times.
Mm-hmm.
He was constantly surrounded by hundreds of people wanting him to touch them, to heal them, to be around them. So how did he take the break, right? We know that we're to have a Sabbath, right? So we know Jesus, he followed the law. He took the Sabbath, that's one thing. But what else can we talk about how Jesus took care of himself? So choosing solitude over the work program, I found this cool little bit we'll kind of walk through. Is in order to prepare yourself, a lot of prayer.
Yep.
Praying to God, right? And so in order to prepare himself mentally and physically for the major assault, one of the first things he did after being baptized by John is he went into the wilderness for 40 days and he prayed. So how did he take care of himself spiritually? He spent time with the Father alone.
Yep.
Right, this is a big one. So that you can read about that in Luke 4, 1 through 2 and verse 14 and 15 is a story of him going into the wilderness, spending 40 days praying. The devil came out and attempted him, and then he came back and began his ministry.
What does that tell you though about Jesus is that he knew who he was praying to.
Yep.
That's really important. So, we're not just praying blindly. Jesus took time to spend time with the Father because he knew it was important, because he knew it was something that was needed to take priority in his life.
Yep.
And I think what a great role model that is already after the first. You got six reasons. The first one is just a killer one, to spend time with the Father is such an important thing.
Yeah,
so
that one-on-one. And then how did he take, the separation? He would also separate himself. This is the biggest thing. He would separate himself, but why? Why do you need to? Well, you can ask yourself those same questions. Why do you need to get away from the hubbub of the world to recharge? Right? Christ had a physical body. He got tired, right? He needed sleep. He needed food. He needed to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
He was a human as well as God. And so he needed to separate himself, so mentally and spiritually, to recharge himself, right? And you read about that in Mark 30, verse 32, as he sent his 12 disciples out to do ministry, right? He sent them all out to go work so that he could recharge.
Yeah.
Right.
We can also remember when they're crossing the lake at Sea of Galilee, and he's sleeping in the front of the boat whilst they're the ones that are rowing and guiding it across. And the storm rages in, they have to wake him back up again. There's the issue that happened there. But to think that in that time he takes these moments to rest, to sleep, to recharge, to get energy.
Well, he set him on the boat, and he said, "Go."
And
he went up on the mountainside.
Yeah.
He said, "You guys need to go. I need to separate myself. Recharge, to pray to God."
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of this is, it's how did he do it? A lot of it was just separating himself to spend time with God. Separating yourself also allows you to work through things like grief.
Yeah.
In Matthew 14, 1 through 13, Jesus learned that John the Baptist had been beheaded.
Yeah.
Jesus removed himself again so that he could pray, to help, digest, would be the word you could use for it, is to be able to work through the sadness of what sin had been doing and killed his, cousin.
And I think that's a big thing as well. When we as humans now, back in Jesus' time, there was no internet. There was no Netflix, there was no, any big distractions really about what could happen. The thing that distracted Jesus the most, and this is why he came to earth, obviously, to do his ministry, was people. People who needed him, hounded him, constantly asked him to be healed, to be looked after. Can I touch your robe? Can I be in your presence? Can I be around you? When he went to houses, people would flock to them. When he went to places, people would follow him.
They would take the roof out and lower their friends into the ceiling,
He was a guy who was highly sought after, and just like you kind of see nowadays with celebrities. They have their security guards around so they can't get close. Jesus didn't have security guards around him. He didn't have people to stop. But you see nowadays people get worn down. But Jesus was consistently loving and kind, but still took time to say, I need a break. I need to go to the Father. Let me rest for a second. I'll be right back. But give me 5.
Give me 5 minutes. Let me have that rest.
Yeah.
And it's important, before, to take that rest. Like I said, I think that's the main point. How did he take care of himself mentally and spiritually? He separated himself. He took rest. And, another example of when he did that was in times of distress important decisions. Luke 6:12-13, spent the whole night alone in prayer next to his 12 disciples.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, again,
they're sleeping out.
Sleeping out. Like, they needed rest too. They're worn out. And so Jesus to, refresh himself mentally, physically, to get prepared, to spiritually prepared to go to the cross. Yeah. He separated himself again, and he spent time praying. I think one of the biggest things that we see that Jesus does to recharge is spend time with God. Yeah. It's amazing that God tells us that it's through Him that you get peace and rest. Yeah. Right. He's the only one who can actually give it to you. Yeah. When we feel physically weak, the Bible tells us it's our weakness that God's strength shines through. And so it's when you're weak, come to God so that it's His strength, right? And Jesus, exemplifies this and gives us several examples of constantly coming back to the Father and letting God, the Father, give him that strength and that spiritual, uplift that he needs to continue to do the physical work. Because though Jesus Christ is God, he still limited himself into the physical body. Yeah. And the physical body can only do so much. Mm-hmm.
And that's the key part right there. He was like man, but God. Yeah. Right? That in human form. So he had those limitations. So he understood what we went through as well. And that's the most incredible thing to think about.
Tempted in all the things that we have to deal with. So that
but never sinned.
Never sinned.
Just tired. Yeah. So took rest. And you think, like, how often do we do that when we overwork ourselves and we just keep going and then you get burnout and you try, as a pastor, it's really funny because you look at it and you go like, well, burnout's not a problem because I'm keeping busy. But actually that could be a sin because you're choosing to not rest in the Father. Yeah. You're not choosing to find comfort and strength and energy. Instead, you're choosing to do it in your own strength. And I think that the example, again, that Jesus gives here is solitude, getting away from distractions. When you do your Bible reading in the morning, if you do you put your phone away? Do you put it aside? Don't turn the TV on. I'll run and I'll grab a coffee and then I'll grab my Bible and I'll sit, and that's how I do it. And I'll put my phone on a different counter, and it doesn't matter if it goes off. It's a Bible time. Yep. The boys, I got a 9 and a 10-year-old. If they come up and they see me reading my Bible, they see that as important. So they don't try to distract me unless the house is on fire or the dog's run out the backyard and is chasing a cat. There's nothing that should really distract me from reading my Bible in the morning unless it's an emergency. And even then you go, okay, so priorities. Where are we right now? Jesus chose to get close to the Father for that strength, for that energy, for the renewal, for all that he needed to do in his ministry.
Yeah, and there's a saying that people, a lot of people say is like, I'd rather wear out than rust out. Yeah. But either way you look at it, you're out.
You're out.
You're out. Yeah. Right? And so, again, how did he take care of himself mentally and spiritually? He removed himself to take the rest, to take the break, to have time to pray with the Father, and to sleep. Yeah. There's a lot of things, you don't think about it as much. You read the stories, it doesn't ever say, and Jesus needed to use the restroom. Yeah. But Jesus needed a break.
He needed to do those things.
He needed to do those things. He needed to sleep, he needed to restroom, he needed to eat, he needed to drink, he needed to...
Well, right now, man, you just had your baby. Yeah. You know how important sleep is right now more than anything else. Man. So it's kind of one of those things you look at and you go like, going through the motions of all that stuff, that's your family's need. You can bear that because it's your family. When Jesus is walking around, he had thousands of people with all of their personal needs being
put on him.
So you think that's no longer just your personal, that is public need. That's everyone's wanting. That must have been exhausting.
Oh, absolutely exhausting. People constantly pulling and tugging on you, and sneaking through the crowd and grabbing a hold of you, and
and he felt it. He'd feel his power leave. He'd feel this, and you go like, wow. Okay, that was constant, right? And people are needy. People need everything. Working for a church, we always kind of say like one kind of crisis a week, potentially. comes up.
Yeah.
And and that's just on we've got 250, 300 people in our church, and you
Yeah.
go one crisis a week. That's only 52 weeks in a year, But Jesus was being hounded by thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people. So you think about that situation times to get to Jesus's, like ours times 10, 20 to get to Jesus's level right there.
Yeah.
No wonder he was tired.
Yeah. Oh, exhausted all the time. The woman at the well.
Yep.
Right. He got there. He was tired. He sat down at the well. And
Can
goes,
you get me a drink?
You guys go in and get the provisions, and the woman comes out and he's like, I'm thirsty. Can you give me a drink?
Yeah.
And of course we know that story and how that all goes, but Jesus needed rest.
Yeah.
He took the physical rest. He took that opportunity and then took the opportunity to share his gospel with the woman.
Yeah.
But again, he separated himself. He said, all right, you guys, go.
Go.
Y'all go. I'm going to wait right here, take a breather, spend some time with God.
Yeah.
Give me a drink of water.
Yeah, and I think this is a key part because nowadays, and even in the Spokane school system, this isn't a criticism. This is just an observation that I've kind of seen and heard. Everyone is being told that they have to look after their mental health. Look after your mental health. If you need a mental health day, take a day away. If you need that time to rest, take the time. And I agree that we all need to look after ourselves to the extent of not burning out and not. But I do think there's something more about why. Why are you burning out? What are you doing that's causing this burnout? What are you doing that's causing you to get to that level? And actually, are you choosing to remove yourself so that you can be renewed?
Yeah.
Because that's the big deal here. Jesus removed himself from those situations, went off into the high places and spent time with the Father, so that he could be renewed, not so that he could go there and moan and grumble about how tired he was, but he took the time to actually be with the Father.
Yep.
And I think that talks about your commitment and your priorities and what even you expect. Because actually, if you go there and you go, I don't think anything's going to change, and then you go, well, why didn't anything change? Well, because you're not actually believing that God can do anything in your life.
Yeah.
And there has to be this moment of faith as well of like, God can, God will, God has done, and will continue to renew, refresh, re-energize, and will continue to do that as well. Are you willing? Are you wanting that? Or do you want to stay in that, I'm having a bad day, let me have a bad day moment? And that's not a criticism towards mental health stuff, that's not a criticism to anything like that. I actually agree that people do need to take time and rest away, and the Bible tells us that. Even with God in creation, I've got Genesis 2 open here, and it says after he's finished creating everything, verse 2 of chapter 2, and it says, and on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. It doesn't say that God was tired. It doesn't say that God was wiped out. It doesn't say that he needs a rest, but it does say he took a rest.
It was an example.
Exactly.
He was setting an example for us. And what's interesting, the verse jumped back in my head is Psalm 23, verse 1 and 2. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Yep.
But the kicker here is, he maketh me lie down in green pastures. Like, that's how important it is that God's like, look, if you won't take a break,
I'll make you.
I'm going to step in, right? I'll make you take a break. I'm going to make you lay down. I'm going to make you rest because you need the rest. You need it. And so God gave us the example right in the beginning. Jesus gives us several examples. In Luke 5:16, it says that he separated himself and went and prayed in the wilderness, right? Like, constantly, when you need a break, take the break. Obviously, God says, take your Sabbath. If you want to take your 6th day, most of us try to do it, but in the modern world, it's kind of hard to take an entire day of not doing anything.
Right.
But that example is there for us. Like, hey, you need to take the break. Mentally, physically, spend time resting your body, pray to God and refresh your mind, your soul, right? Get that life-giving water again, that peace that passeth all understanding. Because if you don't stop to pray, you can't lay your problems down at the foot of the cross, and you're constantly bearing these burdens. Right? Take the break to give your burdens to God, and so that he can help you rest and take the burdens off you and rest.
And it was so important here that not only did Jesus show us an example, God did it during creation. It was then written into the law. So I was just skimming through trying to find the 10 Commandments here, Deuteronomy 5, and you can look at verses 12 up to end of 14 really, but 12, keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it, as the Lord thy God have commanded thee. Verse 13, 6 days thou shalt labor and do all thy work. Verse 14, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well as thou.
Yep.
No one.
No.
You are all meant to take rest. You are meant to take those days.
Take that physical rest.
And resting, not individually, but together.
Yeah.
As a family, I think that's really important.
Yeah, and Paul, in the New Testament, he would on the Sabbath he would go into the synagogue, and they would all together rest from their labor and spend time in the Scripture.
Yeah.
Praying and reading the Scripture to God. And again, it's that example of, hey, take a break, spend time with God, and rest.
Yeah.
Relax.
I do think there's one thing to be said here. Sorry, I've just thought of another thing. Jesus is called a certain thing in regards to the Sabbath. He's called the Lord of the Sabbath.
Oh.
And I think this is a really important thing. I'm looking at Matthew 12, 8. Matthew 12, 8. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. Now, what I think is really funny about this is you can get really legalistic. And I think this is the part where we combat that by saying actually Jesus takes the Sabbath day and makes it about worshiping God and resting in God instead of I need my rest.
Yeah.
It's all about spending time with the Father. So I think because God in the very beginning put into place a Sabbath, a rest day, it's then put into law. It's then shown time and time again by Jesus. People would take it and they'd make this is just the way it has to be. And if you're doing it wrong, you're a sinner.
Yeah.
But then Jesus turns around and says, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. The whole day.
Yeah.
You can't make this a legalistic thing because it's about worship. It's about your Father. And I think that's a really important thing, that it's meant to give us rest. It's meant to give us rest from work, our daily work, but it's meant to help us spend time with God and to be with God in that moment. And it can be taken, and these times can be twisted to make it more of a legalistic thing.
Yeah.
No, I have to have my day off. And it's like, no, you should want to have your day
to look
off.
forward to it.
Right, because you're spending it with who? Your family
and God.
And God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's one of those things I look at and I go, when rest is being asked and then ordered, in the sense of the law, and then being practiced by the Son of God, I do think it's something that we need to take into real significance in our lives so that we don't burn out. So it's kind of, you see, how did Jesus take care of himself? He rested in the Father. Yeah. He took time away from everyone else. He prioritized those times. He made sure he ate. He made sure he had water. He made sure he took care of himself in those ways. And then he shows these amazing examples of when we can get so wound up in the law that he turns around and says, well, remember, I'm the Lord of that Sabbath day as well.
Yeah, and it's we all know it's really easy to not stop, to just go and go and go, and taking a break is also a real step of faith.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, I can stop because it's God who's in charge. Things aren't getting done because I'm putting in all this effort. Right? It's like God saying, hey, I have this.
Yeah.
You can stop and breathe and rest and just hang out with me a little bit. I've got this. You don't have to worry. Right? Because we get in this cycle of, almost fear that if I don't keep going and if I don't maintain this pace, that things are going to fall apart and things aren't going to happen. And God's like, no. I've got this.
If I'm not there,
it's going to go wrong. It's like God's like, no, just have faith, understand that I'm in charge and I have control. You can rest because I'm in control, right? And so again, for that, it's a step of faith to say, okay, I can rest. I can spend a day of just hanging out, spend time with God, drink your water, do some prayer, play some video games or something. Just rest.
Yeah.
Take your head out of it.
And there's something to be said. This world is trying to change this situation of like Sabbath to be more of this mental health day thing and the pampering day and the day off where you can just go and do. What I would say to you as Christians, if you are a Christian, then we should be prioritizing spending that time with the Father. That taking that day is a day that he said, no one in your house should do the work.
Yeah.
Your daughter, your son, your maids, your servants, anyone, your ox even, your donkey even, even all the way through the livestock should not be working on that day. Why? Because actually it's about spending time together, focusing on God on that day.
Yeah.
It's not about that day you go to the mall and you spend $1,000 that you've earned from working and stuff, but it is that day of recharge.
Yeah.
It's refreshing. It's that moment you can turn around and say, actually, I feel renewed by God here.
Right.
Not by my strength, but by His.
It's not that, you're overheating and you need to jump in that cold pool.
Yeah.
It's like you've been just running and running and running, and then the day comes where you can jump in that spring,
Yeah, and that is the refreshing rest that is in the Father.
Yeah.
That He can give to you, that He can give. So I think we kind of wrapped around to the Sabbath a little bit more because that's kind of what God's given to us.
Yeah.
But how did Jesus take care of Himself? He observed the Sabbath.
Yeah.
He took Sabbath in ways that we can now practice now as a great role model, as a great example.
Yeah. Throughout the week, every day, take yourself some time to just separate,
One thing I want to say, and I really dislike this, by the way, but Jesus was an early riser.
Yeah.
He woke up when the sun wasn't up, and he went to those high places and spent time with God. Why? Because no one else would be around.
Yeah.
So I think even spending that time daily where it's just you and God, where it's just you being able to talk and being able to have those conversations, to have that prayer time, is really significant. And I think that's one way that Jesus did take care of himself.
Yeah.
Renewed
Well, it's
by the
amazing
Father.
how the weight of the world was on his shoulders, and God just, let me take that,
Yeah, that's it. And I think, so with this example, we have God in creation, we have the law being written down, observe the Sabbath, then we have Jesus being the ultimate example of how to take care of ourselves in those times because of how he took care of himself.
Yep.
Even with the weight of thousands of people, of those 12 disciples watching him every single day, there's a lot of expectations there of, is this the guy?
Right.
What's he going to do next?
Talk about being a father figure. I mean, the disciples were young kids.
Yeah.
They weren't adults, and so he's got these teenagers running around him,
looking up to him.
Looking up to him. And he set the example of separation and rest and prayer.
Yeah.
And they took notes of it. Totally. They're like, Jesus, teach us to pray. Teach us how you do the things that you're doing. And he's like, because they saw him separating himself. They saw him spending time with the Father. They saw him doing things that nobody else was doing per se. And they're like, teach us how you're doing this.
Yeah.
Walking your walk with God, because it's obviously the best thing we've ever seen. How do we do it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to fire one more thing, and it's a cross-reference from Matthew, which I just read, to Mark. It just gives you a little extra here. So Mark 2:27 and 28, and it says, "And he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath." And I think this is a really key part, that the Sabbath is a gift that has been given to us so that we can take it, we can accept it. What's the point in having a gift if you're never going to unwrap it and accept it and use it?
Yep.
It's just going to stay there under the Christmas tree otherwise.
Look as pretty as it wants to, it's going to do no good.
It's going to do no good, right? So to accept the gift that is that day of rest, Jesus did it, made himself a great example to all who can follow him. And I think that's the key part. When we look at his example of how he took care of himself, we should look to that as well and say, spiritually, are we lining up? We're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be perfect. But are we taking those days of rest? Are we taking those days of renewal? Are we talking to the Father who can actually give those things?
Yeah.
Cool?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Right. Guys, that's our answer. How did Jesus take care of himself? Listen back if you need to again, but that was a good one, man.
I think so.
If you have any questions, email them in, pastorjamie@spokanebaptist.com. We're going through Judges at the moment on Wednesday nights. Check out that as well.
Yep.
We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts or comments, or great to have emails and comments anyway. But thanks for watching. Scott, thanks for your time, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, buddy.